Well, good morning and welcome to Cass City Missionary Church. I'm Pastor Jeremy. It's good to see you guys here. Um, we're good. We're good. It's good. Hope you guys had a great week. It was a great. Just give it a second here. We got some new toys in this week, I guess, and we're trying to figure them out. But good to see you guys. Great to be here. Great to have you guys here. Hope things went well for you this week. Nathan points out the Buffalo Bills did lose, and many of you guys gave me condolences throughout the week. It really seems small in the grand scheme of things, but we do have a saying of Buffalo Bills fans: we'll be back next year. We won't win, but we'll get back there. So it's one of those things. Anyway, I'm excited about this series that we're starting, the Plot Twist. And we're going to define it real quick before we go forward. Plot twist. A plot twist is a radical change in the expected direction or outcome of a plot of a book, a movie, TV series, or a story. When everything points to one direction, when it looks like everything's headed down one way, one path, then all of a sudden there's a plot twist. There's a sudden change. Something comes out of the blue and things aren't the way they seem, or maybe we get a new revelation about what was going on and things don't end up the way we expected it. We see it in movies all the time. If told right, and if a movie is told from beginning to end with nothing exciting in the middle, it probably wouldn't be a very good movie. So these plot twists keep our attention. They make things exciting. They make it so that we're expecting something, and they leave us kind of in awe or surprised. Every good movie has a good plot twist. And I was trying to think of some, and I'll share some throughout the series. But the first one I thought of, the number one in my mind, is The Sixth Sense. I don't know if you've seen this movie or not. I'll try not to spoil it, but it's like 25 years old, guys. So I'll probably spoil it if you haven't seen it yet. It's about a movie about a kid that was seeing things, so he's seeing a psychologist about it. And the psychologist is trying to help him figure out what he's seeing. And he finally says and confides in the psychologist, "I'm seeing dead people. Like I see dead people." And the whole movie is the psychologist helping the child figure this out. And then at the very end, there's a plot twist that the psychologist is dead. Like he's the dead person. So one of the dead people. So no one saw it coming. If you've seen the movie, many people told me that when they watch it, that they go back and rewatch it because it left it in awe. It changed the whole complexion of the movie. It changed everything about the movie. And that's what a plot twist does. Nobody's expecting it. All of a sudden things are going down one path and then boom, totally different light, totally different movie, totally different situation. And the reason we're talking about them here in church is because I believe that they're not just for movies and stories. I believe in our lives we have numerous plot twists as we live our life, as we go about things, and we're headed down the path, and those plot twists aren't coincidental. They're God's hand in our life, changing our life. And so I think we can look at the Bible and look at how the Bible is full of plot twists, how God changes the path and direction of his people from time and time again. We can learn some things from these plot twists that God provides, and I think we can be encouraged by it. And many of us, I think if we're honest, could look back and say, oh yeah, I was headed this way, and then something drastically changed. Something changed my life, and now I'm going down a different path. For me, I didn't come to Christ till I was in my mid-20s. So I was headed down a completely different path. I had a completely different view of the world. And then all of a sudden, God grabbed my heart and showed me a new way and had a new revelation. And boom, I was headed a different path. Some of them can be good. Some plot twists are great. I hear stories of people who are in financial struggles and financial troubles, and whether they lose a job or their house burns down or their car breaks down, something happens, or medical bills that were unexpected come, and they have no way out, and they're like, we've been in this for so long, and this struggle for so long, and then all of a sudden a check comes in the mail, and they don't know where it came from, or God touched someone's heart to provide, or they get financial aid, they get a job promotion or a new job, and all of a sudden their tomorrow looks different than what it did before. There's a plot twist. Some are not so great. Some people are living life and things are going good. It seems like everything's lined up and things are just at work and things are moving just the way they want them to do. And then all of a sudden they get a unannounced diagnosis or an unexpected layoff at work, or something comes along and now their tomorrow looks a little rough, a little more difficult than what yesterday looked like. And they're in the middle of this plot twist. And so our lives are full of them. It's not a straight line. Our faith journey is not a straight line. There's plenty of twists and turns. And I think we can look to the Bible, see how God handles these. And so God puts these plot twists in place in Scripture. And we can pull some wisdom out of that. And so today we're going to look at a story that's full of plot twists and it's surprising. And it's the book of Esther. The book of Esther is found in the Old Testament. And it was around the time that Jerusalem was in exile during the Babylon exile. Now, they had the Jewish people had a chance to go back to Jerusalem and live back there, but many of them chose to stay in exile and stay away from their homeland because they were in exile for so long. That's the only life that they had to know. So a few weeks ago, we talked about Nehemiah and how he was during this time. So just before he started to rebuild the walls, there was a story of Esther. Esther was in there. And Esther and some of her relatives were ones that chose to stay in the exile, stay in the land of Persia, and not return to Jerusalem. So they find themselves in a place called Susa. And I'm going to go through pretty much the whole story of Esther very quickly. And I'm going to give you my version of it, the JIV, the Jeremy International Version. So I'm going to encourage you guys to go and read it. Read it for yourselves because you don't want to rely on just my interpretation of this book. But the whole story is incredible. So I want to give an overview of the whole story. We're going to highlight some verses as we go. But I want to get you a feel for exactly what God was doing in this book. So it doesn't take long to read. I found it took me about an hour to read. And so I was able to read through it every day this week. And then it's even less if you listen to the Bible app and you put it on and you play it. It only took about 40 minutes to listen to it. So I have to go pick my kids up from school. It's about 40 minutes. I listen to it on the way there. So every day this week I got to listen to it. It doesn't take a lot of investment. But I encourage you to do it after you hear this. Just you can fact check me. You can make sure everything's in line. And then God will show you things that I can't point out. So I encourage you to read it for yourself. But the story of Esther, we're going to just cover it real fast and then point out some points at the end here. Esther takes place in a place called Susa and is ruled by King Xerxes. And King Xerxes had a huge kingdom, King of Persia at the time. And right away we see that King Xerxes likes to party. He likes to party. He likes to have parties. He likes to have banquets. And during these banquets, they drink a lot of wine. They highlight that over and over and over. There's a lot of wine that was drank. And so right at the beginning of the story, he's throwing this party, and this party lasts 180 days. It's quite the party, and the whole point of the party was for people to come in and see how great this king is. See all the riches he has, see how much wine he can drink, see how much food that he has, and they come and they really have to honor and worship this king. And at the end of that 180-day party, he says, let's have another party. And so he has a 7-day party. And at the end of that 7-day party, it says he had much wine. He drank quite a bit. And he says, I got an idea. All you guys have to see my queen. Because the Bible says, this isn't me, the Bible says she's something to look at. So I want you guys to see her, and she'll have her crown on, and she'll come, and you guys will be just in awe how beautiful my queen is, and then you'll know how great I am. The problem is the queen was having her own banquet, and when they sent the eunuchs that took care of that stuff to go get her, she says, no, I'm not going to come. I don't want to come. I'm not going to do it. So she denied the king. Now the king, the other thing we know about him is he builds his world, his life, around never hearing bad news. So there's a rule of the land that if you came before the king and he didn't want you there, he could deny you and then you would just die. They'd say, kill that person. I don't want to. You could only go before the king if he called you and invited you before the king. It was his way of controlling the information that he got, and he only wanted good news, no bad news. So he wanted to live a good life. He wanted to make sure everyone was happy. He didn't want to see the outside troubles in the world. So if you were invited, you could come. If you came uninvited and he rejected you, he would have you killed. Now, he could give you his golden scepter and you could touch it and then you could be in his presence, but no one really took that risk because it's all or nothing there. So to tell him no was a big deal. And so he gets his buddies together and the people that keep the law. He goes, what does this mean? She tells me no. Like, what do I have to do? He's very angry and very drunk. And most people, when they drink and they're drunk, don't make good decisions. So that's kind of a side story here. If you're drunk, you don't make good decisions. And so this king was drunk a lot. So you can take what you want with that. But he says, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm mad. Like, what? And they said, well, this is bad. This is really bad because everyone's going to look to the queen and see how she told you no. And then every woman in their household and all the noble people and their wives will tell them no. And then the whole land, the wives will be telling them no, will be chaos. We can't have that. So the king says, yeah, we can't. So here's the thing. This queen's done. She's done. She's never allowed to come before me again. She's cut off. We're going to find a new queen. And then I'm also going to put a decree out there that every woman has to respect their husband. And the man's the head of the household. So this is a great story, right? This is one of my favorites. Yeah, okay, that was good. No, that's not, you don't make good decisions when you're drinking a lot. This would never work out. But so that was the law of the land. And then when the king makes a decree, that's the other thing. He seals it with his ring, and it could never be he can never undo it. He can't be like, oh, that was just a bad day. He can't. So that's the law of the land now. And now as a result of that, they have to find a new queen. So he sends out his people to scour the land for all the young, beautiful virgins that they think that would please him, and they gather them all up and then kind of do like a beauty pageant for him, and he's going to choose who his queen's going to be. And so that's when we run into Esther. Esther's a Jewish girl that her parents were dead, so she lived with the relative Mordecai, and Mordecai is a Jewish man that loved Esther like a daughter, took care of her like a daughter, raised her like a daughter. And Esther gets into this beauty pageant, into this this crowd where they're going to go before the king, and the king's going to decide who's going to be my queen. And so Mordecai thinks this is a good idea, but tells her, don't tell anyone you're Jewish. Like, keep that part a secret. Don't tell them you're related to me. Don't give them a hint that you're Jewish, and see how it goes. And so it takes a year for you to get these women and to get them all, I don't know, they feed them certain stuff, they give them these baths and these oils, and to get them presentable to the king, I guess you would say. So it takes a whole year. So during that year, Mordecai goes to the gates of the courtyard, and he can get messages to Esther, and he can get messages from Esther, and he loves Esther. He wants to check on her, make sure she's doing good. So every day, Mordecai goes to the gates and just checks on her, see how it's going. And so Esther finds favor with the king and selected to be the queen. So that's good news and bad news, because you see what happened to the last one. And now you're at the mercy of the king. But that's probably best case scenario for her in this situation. So one of the days Mordecai is at the gates, he hears two of the guards disgruntled and plot to kill the king. And so Mordecai gets a message to Esther and says, you got to warn the king, this plot's going to happen. They're going to kill the king. And so Esther goes to the king, because now she has an audience with the king, and says, listen, I heard of a plan of an attack from this guy named Mordecai, and gives him the credit, and they're going to try and kill him. So the king investigates and finds it's a credible act. This was really going to happen. And so how they deal with that, and most of the time when they die, they have these big poles with these spikes, and they just throw you on them, and then you're impaled, and you sink down them, and it's pretty gruesome. And so these two guys were found to be guilty of plotting to kill the king, and so the king throws them on these spikes and impales them, and it's pretty gross. And then they record this in this book. They have a book of deeds that happened in the kingdom that would please the king. Like, this was a good thing. Mordecai saved your life. They record this in the book, and that's important. So things are going this way. And then while this is happening, we get introduced to Haman. Haman's kind of the evil guy in the story. He's promoted by the king to second in command. He's found favor with the king. He's promoted by the king. And it goes to his head. He gets a pretty big head. He's pretty prideful about this. So he thinks, and kind of the law of the land, he was right, when he walks down the courtyard, everyone should bow down before him. Now, Mordecai doesn't bow down before him. We know he's a Jewish person, probably because he won't worship anyone other than the king, or other than Jesus and God, Yahweh. So he doesn't bow down, and Haman gets pretty upset with this. Haman doesn't like this very much. So Haman says, who is this guy? Oh, that's Mordecai. He's a Jewish guy. Then he looks at the Jewish people and he says, they worship different. They do things different. They don't really fit in with their society. They don't really look the same as us and talk the same as us. So I got a solution, because I got to solve this Mordecai problem, because he's so full of himself, he thinks everyone should be worshiping him. And when someone doesn't, it just burns at him. And so he decides to go to the king, and the king gives him his ring so he can make any law and decree and stamp it with the ring, and then it's law of the land, as if the king himself did it. He decides he's going to pick a day, and they roll some dice, and they cast some lots, and they find a day. And on that day, there's an order that all the people are going to kill all the Jewish people in the land. So all the Jewish people are marked for a day of death. And this gets out there. They send a letter to everyone across the land. So Mordecai finds out about it, and he's distraught. So he puts a sackcloth on, and he's mourning at the gate, as a Jewish custom would be. He's in mourning. And this gets back to Esther, and Esther said, what's wrong? And so they get messages back and forth. And he said, well, this is going to happen. He goes, oh, no, this is bad. We can't do that. And there's really no stopping it because Haman's second in command. What he says goes. He gave the stamp of the seal. The king did it. There's no undoing it. This is going to happen. And Mordecai's like, we have to do something because you're Jewish too, Esther. And they're going to find out about that. So when this day comes, you're going to die too. Like you can't get away from this. You're the only one in the position to do anything about it. And he says, God kind of put you here for such a time as this. Have you considered that? Like, you have to do something. And Esther goes, I don't know what to do. Like, if I go before the king, I'm at risk of dying too. So the queen has to be invited by the king too. And she goes, it's been 30 days since she's called me in front of him. Who knows when I'll talk to him again? And Mordecai's like, you have to try. Like, what if you're the one that can save us? And so here's what Esther says. We're already in chapter 4. Esther says, and I just want to give you a glimpse of how serious this was. She says, go gather together all the Jews who are Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I'll go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. It's our only shot. I'm going to die anyway. So if I die, I die. I'm going to risk everything to go before the king. And when Esther does, she does find favor with the king. And he holds out the scepter, and she touches the scepter. And the king drinks a lot, and he does foolish things. So he says, my queen, what do you want? You found favor with me. I'll give you anything you want, up to half my kingdom. That's a foolish thing to do. Up to half my kingdom, you can have anything you want. And Esther, who's pretty smart, is like, this is going to be a big ask. I'm going to have to reveal I'm Jewish, which could get me killed. I'm going to go before the king, which could get me killed. I'm probably going to have to give him bad news about Haman, which could get me killed. Like, this isn't going to go in my favor. So she says, all I want is to throw you a party in your honor, you and Haman. I want you and Haman there at the party in your honor. Can I do that for you? That's all I want. So she's thinking, yeah, we'll honor him, build up his pride. We'll give him a lot of wine, and then I'll ask the real ask. And so that's what they do. They have this banquet, and everything's good. And the king drinks quite a bit and says, what can I give you? Like, what do you want? Like, you're buttering me up for something. What can I give you? And Esther's like, this might take 2 days of wine. This is going to be a big one. So all I want is to throw you another party, you and Haman, tomorrow. Like, that's all I want. And if you do that for me, then I'll tell you what I really want. But, like, let's just have another party. And so Haman leaves, and he leaves full of himself. I mean, his head's this big now because here he's second in command. He has everything the world has to offer. He's promoted as how you can. And now the queen is throwing a party just for him and the king. Like, put him on the same level. So I want to give you a sense of where Haman's at, because this is important. And in chapter 5, is where we're at. We see Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth. So he went home to his family and gathered his family and friends. He's like, you guys got to hear about this. And he boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons he had, all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above all the other nobles and officials. And that's not all he says. Haman added, I'm the only person that Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow as well. But he goes, but all this gives me no satisfaction, because every time I walk by Mordecai, he's not bowing down to me. And as long as he's sitting at the king's gate, I can't get satisfaction in this. So he's boasting. He's full of himself. He's everything in his life is perfect except for Mordecai. And that's burning, and that's killing him, and that's tearing him up inside. He's like, I can't even enjoy how great I am because of this guy. So his friends say, it's simple. Put a pole out there. Go 50 cubits high, which is pretty big, and then we'll just throw him on him, like impale him. Like, you're the second in command. Just make that decree. Go to the king. Say you have to do this. And so that's what Haman says he's going to do. He's going to put the pole up right by his house, and then he's going to put Mordecai on it, and then all his troubles will be over. And he's thinking everything's great. So now, chapter 6, we see the plot twist start to happen. This is what the plot twist is, because here we have a king, and right up to this point, everything's going against Mordecai. Everything's going against the Jewish people. There's a day that they're going to die. They're going to be wiped out. It's out there. Everyone knows it. There's nothing they can do about it. They can't fight back. They can't do anything about this. It's a decree that this is going to happen. Mordecai is going to be impaled. This guy that the king loves is doing whatever he wants and has it out for him. Nothing's going their way, except for Esther did find some favor with him as he has this big ass coming up. But before they get to it, now here's the other thing about this story. God is not mentioned one time in it. Like God's name, the Lord, isn't mentioned a single time in this book. It's something the author does to show us that God may not be mentioned, it may not be put right in front of your face, but he's always working. He's always doing something even when you can't see it. And this is proof, because that night after the party, the day before the next party, this king should have nothing to worry about. He built his life on having no stress, no anxiety, no worry, but he finds himself not able to sleep. For some reason, his spirit's restless. For some reason, he can't sleep, and he's tossing and turning, so he calls in his people and he says, you guys got to read me a bedtime story. And so they bring in this book of good deeds, and they flip it open, and maybe they randomly flipped, or maybe they said, we need something recent so that he would remember, maybe something, but he flip it open, they read about how Mordecai saved his life. You remember when Mordecai warned you of that danger, and your beautiful queen came and warned you of it, and then we uncovered it, and we impaled him, and we saved your life, and that will cheer you up, right? Remember that? And the king goes, oh, I do. Like, what did we ever do for Mordecai? Like, did we even acknowledge him? Like, did we do anything for the guy? And they say, no. Like, he's fine. He did. He goes, well, we got to do something. We got to do something for this guy. And in that moment, he says, go out in the courtyard and find somebody to bring in here, because we got to figure out what to do. And they go out, and who's coming in there? Haman. Haman's coming to say, we got to kill Mordecai. Like, we got to impale him. I got the pole ready to go. Please give me the word. We're going to impale him. Instead, the king pulls him in and says, look, Haman, you're my second in command. If I'm pleased with somebody, what should I do for him? Like, if I'm happy with someone and I'm pleased with what they're doing, what reward should they get? Now, Haman's full of himself. And he just got done bragging about how he's the greatest guy in the world and the king loves him the most, the queen loves him the most. So he thinks, who else is more loved than me? Who else pleases the king more than I do? I'm going to come up with a good reward, and this is what he gives for a reward. Haman thinks, this is going to be mine, right? So I better make it good. Everything I want, and this will really burn Mordecai. So he says, and I think we're in chapter 6 and 7 through 9, yeah. So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have him by a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse that the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on his head. Then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on a horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. So he's saying, get him a robe, give him a horse, give him the best thing, get your best official to lead this man around and say, look how great this guy is, the king loves this guy. And the king says, that's an awesome idea. You're my best official. You go get Mordecai, give him the robe, give him the crown, give him the ring, give him everything, put him on a horse, parade him around the city, and tell everyone how great Mordecai is. And that's what he has to do. Talk about a plot twist. And then Haman comes back embarrassed and angry and irate to his people. It's like, you do not believe what I just had to do. I can't believe the very guy that's thorn in my side, I just had to go say how great he was and how much the king loves him. And before he can really get into it, they come and say, oh, your second party's ready, come on back. And so now they're having this party, and they have a lot of wine, and the king asks for the third time, what can I give you, Esther? Like, what can I give you? Half of my kingdom will be yours if you just tell me what you want. And Esther says, there's only one thing I want. My people are going to die at the hands of this evil one. This one person has set out to kill all my family, all my lineage, and even myself because I'm Jewish. And the king says, oh, who is that? And he goes, Haman. She says, Haman, the very one that's next to you. So the king's kind of upset, doesn't really know what to do, and he leaves for a minute to think. It's a bad moment for him. Because now he promised, and the king can't go back on his promise, that he'll give the queen whatever she wants, up to half the kingdom. And what she wants is Haman's rule to be undone, but he can't really undo it, so what's he going to do? And while he leaves, Haman is like, oh, I'm in trouble. So Esther's sitting down and reclined, and Haman throws himself on her and begs for mercy. Like, I'm in trouble. You have the king's ear. I know what this means. The king can't go back on his word. Please spare me. Please have mercy. Please, no. And the king comes and says, look at Haman in there. Like, has he no shame? He's going to throw himself on my wife and take what he wants and dishonor my wife at the same time because he's drinking. And you don't always see things for what they are when you're drinking. Being drunk's never a good idea. And so he's looking and he's saying, what can we do with this? And then some of the officials go, probably didn't like Haman. Haman's full of himself. He probably didn't have a lot of friends. So they say, well, I do know that Haman has this pole to kill Mordecai. You know, the one that saved you, just honored. He was going to kill him. You should use that pole for him. Oh, yeah, great, perfect. So they take Haman and throw him on the pole that was put there for Mordecai and impale Haman. That's quite the plot twist. All in just a few hours, go from the worst of the worst for Mordecai to being honored, and his enemy being the weapons that he set and the traps that he set for him were being used against Haman. That's quite the plot twist. And so then Haman's spot has to be filled. Now there's another vacancy. And they say, no, why don't we put Mordecai there? And Mordecai is given the same ring that Haman got, and he can make the same decrees. And so Mordecai says, we're going to make a decree that the Jewish people can defend themselves. You can't undo what's already been done, but they can defend themselves, and we're going to prepare them, and they're going to be prepped. And again, the Lord's hand is on this, never mentioned, but the Jewish people like annihilate their enemies. Like they lay waste to them. When that day comes and they get attacked, they lay waste, and Esther says, no, what, that went so well, let's do it for another day. And so it goes well again, and the Persian kingdom actually is more feared this way. Because they know Mordecai is at the head, and they know Mordecai is favored by God, and they know Jewish people are favored by God, and now no one's going to come against them. So the king actually looks better, and now Mordecai is the second in command, and 2 Jewish people are in the 2 highest ranking spots in the Persian army because of the things that God has done. Talk about a plot twist. On the verge of being annihilated, wiped out face of the earth, all of a sudden things twist, and now they're running the Persian Empire. They're the ones at the head of the thing. So it's a pretty good story, right? I just told it to you. But it's more than just a story. It's for us. Like, what can we gain from this story? What can we learn from Haman and Mordecai and Esther and the king? Besides, like, you don't make good decisions when you're drunk. I mean, we could say what we want about drinking. Drinking is not inherently sinful. People drink, but you don't make good decisions when you're drunk. So we can learn that. That's a side thing. I won't bring that up much today. But there's some other things that we can learn about this story. And the first one, I think, is we have 2 of the main characters, Haman and Mordecai. And they are at odds with each other, and they're on different ends of the spectrum. And they live very different lives. Mordecai, there's no mention, so I don't know if you guys even thought about this. Mordecai saved the king's life and got 0 reward for it. And there's no mention that he's bitter, that he's angry, that he's resentful, or that he thinks he deserves something, that he thinks he earned something. He lived a humble life before the Lord. And we know that he was Jewish and that he followed the Jewish laws, that he lived a humble life before the Lord, because he worshiped differently. That's one of the things that drove Haman crazy. They worshiped differently. They wouldn't bow down before officials. They mourned the way that Jewish people mourned. They celebrated the way the Jewish people celebrated. And he lived a humble life before the Lord, which meant he wanted to save the king's life because it was the right thing to do. And he did it purely to help out Esther. It put Esther in a good light. He didn't do it for selfish ambitions. He did the right thing for the right reasons, and he lived a humble life before the Lord. Haman, on the other side, probably took credit for a lot of things that weren't his doing. And when he got credit, he wanted to make sure everybody knew it. And he touted himself, and he had a big head, and he was prideful, and he made sure, and if one person didn't do what he was supposed to do, he ate on him and killed him and devoured him. And he lived in misery and unforgiveness and anger and dispute, even though he had all the things the world had to offer. James 4 tells us that he gives us more grace. God gives us more grace than we deserve, and that's why Scripture said God opposes the proud, but favors the humble. God opposes this is a story about one person who's humbly living before the Lord and one person that's proudly living before the world. And God humbles the proud, but favors the humble. We should live our life in a way that's different than the world, but in a humble way. It should be. Now, Esther and Haman weren't perfect, and that we'll get to it, but they made the main point, and they didn't denounce someone the wickedness that was happening in the town. They lived in this area, this Persia. They lived in it, and they lived humbly in it. And they served the Lord humbly. And there was no sense of Mordecai wouldn't bow down before Haman because he was rightfully in Haman's spot. Like Haman was rightfully in his spot. He should have been there. He earned it. The king should be more loyal. There's no hint of that. There's not one word that says Mordecai was upset with the king or had any false feelings. He lived humbly before the Lord. He trusted in the Lord. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He didn't expect things back from it. Now, that's relevant to us. I worked at Dow Chemical for a number of years. In my job, I would go into plants for a little while, stay there, and then leave, and had specific tasks I would do. But sometimes I was just there to help out. And one of the plants I went into just had a horrible atmosphere. It was toxic. We're supposed to be a team, like every workplace, right? Every one of your managers, we're a team. It doesn't always feel like a team, does it? Especially with management. But at Dow Chemical, some of the plants were dangerous. Like some of them have very serious chemicals that if you got even a dime-sized drop on you within 10 minutes, it could kill you. Like some of this, so you have to work as a team because this is dangerous stuff and you have to look out for each other. This plant was not functioning like that. Everyone's out for themselves because they realize, yeah, we work as a team, but individuals get promoted. Like we're supposed to be a team, but individuals. So every individual wanted to be that individual that got the promoted. Well, how do you do that? You promote yourself sometimes. Sometimes to promote yourself, you have to step on other people to get higher. And that's the way this place functioned. It was not very good. In fact, I didn't share this first service. I forgot about it. It was so bad that people would just do stuff. And it was bad that I went home. This is the only time I ever did this. I put, if God is for you, who could be against you? And I wrote it out and I put it on the lip of my cap, underneath my ball cap. So it was there because I had to remember, don't fight that battle. These people aren't against you. God's for you. You don't have to act like that. You don't have to put people down. You don't have to make sure that everything you do is in the light. And I had to keep that in the forefront of my mind because I knew it was toxic. I knew it wasn't right. And I knew I was only going to be there for a little while. So just shut up and deal with it. That's kind of what I was telling myself. But I didn't want to, I was a new believer. And I was taking it seriously. And I didn't want to have a poor attitude at work because some people were causing some problems. And I wanted this to be real. I wanted my faith to be real. I wanted the way I live before God to be real. And I didn't want to mess that up because of this circumstances. And I didn't want to promote myself. I needed to make more money. I wanted to get promoted, but I didn't want to make it that. So there was a problem at the plant one day. And we're all kind of stuck about what to do. We didn't know what to do. How were we going to get past this problem? And it was going to severely limit the things that we could do, and it was going to be bad if we couldn't come to a solution. This guy, Bill, came up with a solution. Brilliant solution. Resolved the problem. The problem for me, I guess, was that I was the one that had to implement the solution. Like, he came up with it. He thought of it. But it was my job. He said, Jeremy, if you could do your job this way and you could change this thing and you can do that, I think that would alleviate the bottleneck in the job flow. And he was right. And it wasn't that I was doing anything wrong. It was just that the system wasn't working because of this problem. And we could alleviate it, but it was my part of my department, my job. So I'm the one that actually implemented his solution. So we get in our meeting with management, and management was a little disconnected. Sometimes that happens. That was a lot of the problem. And they point out, they take a minute and say, Jeremy, great, I saw you did this, and that, good job, And I almost felt everyone's eyes roll like, this is what happens. You don't look out for yourself. Someone else gets the credit. And so I just said, and I wasn't very aware of this whole thing. I can look back and see it now. I just said, yeah, that really was the solution, but that was Bill's idea. It was a great idea. Bill did it. And I gave him the credit that was due to him because I didn't care. It was 15 seconds of being, hey, good job. Everyone in the room knew it, so why not just say, like, no, I'm glad it worked out, but man, that was actually Bill's job. And that was so unique and so different than what their culture was. Bill came up to me and was like, well, that was different. I was like, what? He said, normally people would just take the credit and stomp on everyone else and say how great they are. I said, well, everyone knows you did. He goes, it doesn't matter what people know. It's what management sees. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's no big deal to me. It was just the way I thought. It wasn't like I'm doing something on purpose, but it was countercultural. Normally they would be like, yeah, that's my credit. Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, I'm good. So what do you have for me? Now, the problem for me was the next day, because I got feeling like, oh, this is bad. This makes me look bad, like I'm a suck up or something, like I'm the teacher's pet or something. But I did the right thing. The next day I got a carrot, what they call carrots at Dow. It's spelled with a K, like 14 karat gold. It's meant to be reward someone that did something good. I never liked it because I thought carrot with a C, and if you throw a carrot over a horse's face, they'll walk, and so it's like they're just throwing a carrot over, making it walk. I'll walk without the carrot, guys. I don't need the. It kind of was demeaning to me, but it wasn't meant. It was a carrot with a K, but I thought it was like a double meaning, so I never really liked it. Anyway, I get this carrot, and what it was you get an email, and you open up, and there's a nominal value assigned to it, like $50, $100. Normally they're $50, normally $100, and it's like, good job at something. So I'm like, oh, great, this is going to be even great, because everyone finds out you get a carrot. They're going to be like, he got a carrot for what Bill did, even though he said Bill. So I'm like, this is going to be terrible. But I opened up, and it was a larger than normal value, like $500 or $1,000, I don't remember. Larger than normal. I'm like, what? And I opened it up, and the carrot wasn't for the task that I completed. It was that the management recognized that there was a toxic environment. And it said Jeremy displayed the leadership skills necessary to change that environment around. By giving credit to somebody else instead of taking it for himself, he promoted his coworkers above himself, and that's what he's being recognized for. Talk about a plot twist. That's how Mordecai was. Mordecai wasn't out self-serving, doing his own thing, trying to get his own way, trying to make his name higher. He was trying to make sure Esther was cared for and just survive. Like, his people are going to be annihilated. He cared about his people. So he wanted to live humbly before the Lord, and the Lord, God, who was never mentioned, exalted him. Haman was out for himself, and he wanted everyone to know it, and the Lord humbled him. So that's the first point I think we can get from Esther's. And this twist, this plot twist, I think we see in our own life. Sometimes we have to just humble down and say, you know what? The world's ways aren't the way that we're supposed to be. And even if I get stepped on, even if I get kicked, even if I get treated badly, I know I'm serving the Lord, not men. And the Lord favors the humble and opposes the proud. So the second thing is that we're flawed. We're flawed people, but God still uses us. Esther and Mordecai didn't come up with the holiest plan, I don't think. Like, they didn't denounce the wickedness of the ways of Persia. They were deep in the system, and in fact, they said, oh, we got to get the king to do something? Why, I know he makes dumb decisions. We liquor him up pretty good. In fact, it's going to take 2 days. Let's get 2 days of liquor in him, then we'll ask. Like, that's not the most holy thing to do, right? The most righteous thing to do. We're flawed people. We're flawed. But God chooses to work with us and through us, despite our flaws. Now, they wanted the good thing. They were honoring God, and they weren't like wicked in any way, but they thought, we'll use the world system against it, and we know how it works. And they weren't like trying to like make Persia live holy. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was survival, and we got to make sure our people don't get annihilated because that represents God. And we're flawed. We don't always do things right. We don't always have the right answer, and we don't always do the right thing, but God wants to use us the same way he used Esther and put him in the right place. God has a plan for all of us, despite our flaws. And if we live humbly before him, despite our flaws and our flawed nature, he will use us for his purpose. So the third thing, and we'll wrap up with, God is always working and protecting his people. We may not see it. The author, I think, intentionally leaves out God from the picture to show us that he is not mentioned. He's not overtly worshipped. He's not overtly called on, but he's always working to protect his people. There's these coincidences that happen during this story. Mordecai's at the gate at the right time to hear the story, to hear the plot to kill the king. What a coincidence. He tells Esther, who coincidentally got favored by the king to be the next queen. What a coincidence. And so she can plan it in the king's head and reveal this, and also plan in that Mordecai was the reason for it. That's quite a coincidence. And then the night that the king has a banquet and Haman's had enough and he's going to impale Mordecai, all that gets brought up because the king can't sleep. The king's restless because of anxiety and stress, which he seeks to eliminate from his life. There should be none. He just got a day of drinking and partying, and now he can't sleep and he's restless, and so he has to be reminded of what Mordecai. What a coincidence that he couldn't sleep on that night. Sometimes when we can't sleep, it's because God's stirring in our heart something, and he has a plan for us, and he has a purpose for us, and he wants to get our attention. That's God's hand in all this. Mordecai and Esther did the best they could with their plan. Like, conceal this, deceive that, do this. But if it wasn't for God's hand, his overall fingerprint on the story, The Jewish people aren't spared. But God protects his people. Mordecai couldn't save the Jewish people from annihilation, but God could. And he wasn't overtly seen in the story, but his hand was all over it. In our lives, there's times when we don't know where God is. We don't know what God's doing. It looks bad. It looks like there's nothing good coming. We can trust that God's hand's on our life, that he's doing something, that he's working something out. And any minute we could see this plot twist. We could be revealed we could have a new image of God or a new plan of God revealed to us. And any image or tomorrow can look way different than our yesterday. But we don't always see it, but we can trust that God's working. God's always working to protect his people. We can learn from Esther and God that he has a plan for our lives. And he has a time and a place for us today. Esther, Mordecai said, have you considered that you're made for such a time as this? Like, we're made on purpose by God for this time. Sometimes it takes courage to step out, even risk death like Esther. Chances are we won't have that extreme, but it might feel like it. We have to step out with courage to fulfill God's plan that he has for our life. But he has a plan and a purpose, and he has us in this time, and he can work and use us despite our flaws. And when everything seems like it's done and it's hopeless and there's nothing good going on, he's going to throw a plot twist in there and show us that he's always working for us. He is always protecting his people. When they're scheming and plotting and using the world, he's protecting us and working for us, even when we don't see it. We can learn from Esther that God favors the humble, to live humbly lives before the Lord. Opposes the proud. And even through our flaws, he has a purpose for us and a time for us. And even when it's the bleakest and we don't see God actively working in our lives, we can trust that he's alive and well, and he's always going to protect his people. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this story of Esther, and we thank you that as we read it, and as unlikely as it is that these two humble Jewish people would end up running Persia, you have a hand in it. You have a say in it. It's not up to us. You're working in ways that we can't work, and you're doing the same for us in our lives. You're putting plans in place that we can't even see. We only see the world view of it. We only see what we can control, and sometimes it looks pretty bleak. God, but you show us over and over and over that you're ready to be there and you're ready to protect us. And we thank you for using us even though we're flawed. We have sins. We do things that are wrong. We say things that are wrong. Even when we're trying to do the right thing, sometimes we ruffle feathers because of our nature. But in spite of all of that, you're going to use us. We don't have to be perfect. You have a plan for us, you have a place for us, and you're going to use us. And you're always there behind the scenes, working out our lives and planning our lives. And your plans are way better than anything we can come up with. So God, help us recognize that in the moment. Help us see your hand. Give us a glimpse of light in the darkness that we live in at times. And when you're leading us, God, lead us a brighter path so that we can clearly see the way. Give us the joy that you speak about, so that we know that we're living for you and we're doing the right thing, and keep us guarded, our hearts guarded away from the world ways, the attitudes and the grumbling and the complaining. Those are the things that will stand us out much more than our behaviors. God, continue to work on our hearts. Give us a heart that just looks different than the culture, a countercultural heart, so that we can serve you better. We thank you and we love you. Amen.